where we'll share more information about Journey Church, answer all of your questions, and share information about the next steps. With the new year upon us, it's time to change out your yard signs. You can return the Christmas signs or hold on to them for next year. We have new signs available at the Next Steps table. That's all the news for this week. I'm Raven Fritz. And remember, no matter who you are, you belong here.
I wish I could be the person that could walk into a place that had a need and just write a check. My wife would like to go down to the Dog Rescue League and just write a quadrillion-dollar check and just bring all the dogs home. That way we could just have trash forever in our yard. I mean, that would just make our house so happy. And you know, we want to be that person that's so generous. But last week we used this analogy here, and I'm going to get to this in a minute. But we used the analogy of, you know, if God owns everything, you can find this in Genesis. God owns everything, and he gives us, or Deuteronomy, and he gives us the power to produce wealth. And we said this was like the conduit that God uses to transfer the wealth, the things that he has to us. We all have jobs. We all have capabilities of doing things. And we said it's not about how much you have, but it's more about what you do with what you have that matters. And so you have these resources because God owns everything, and he gives them to us, and then we are the pipe that comes off of the thing that God has provided for us. But for so many of us, myself included, we have done something that looks kind of like this. You ever uncoiled your water hose only to find out there's this? You put the sprinkler out in the front yard, and you're not getting any water out of it, and you trace it back down. Oh, there's a knot, and you undo it, and you like get blasted in the face, and you know, it like blows your hair off, and that's exactly what happened to me. It's a water sprinkler accident. And so we, you know, there's this kink, there's this knot, this thing that's causing a crimp in the hose. And so we wind up with, we talked about last week, this financial pressure because it builds up on the upstream side of that knot. And the pressure in the hose begins to kind of leak. But what God really intends for our life to look like is something like this. God owns everything, and he gives it to us. He gives us the power to produce wealth, and then there's this conduit that he allows that stuff to flow through. And so often we tie a knot in it, and then we get angry at God and go, God, wait a minute. Now, you said if I was faithful and I was generous and I was a giver and I was all these things and, I was trying to be a good steward, that I would have plenty of whatever. And God's saying, yeah, that's right, but you keep tying knots in the hose. You keep buying stuff that you don't need with money you don't have to impress people that you really don't even like. We've all been there. I've done that. I've done stupid with zeros behind it. And so today what I want to do is I want to unpack the idea of why. You ever had one of these? You ever seen one of these? Raise your hand if you've ever had one of these that did not leak. Okay, one little kid. Awesome. Right? Like every one of these that you have leaks like a sieve. It doesn't matter. I mean, I even have one of the expensive, like $24 Home Depot jobs at the house. You turn the water on and it's like, that one little stream that just shoots halfway across the yard. It's a rainbow every time you turn the water faucet on. Today I want to talk about the idea of why. We're going to talk about debt and how to get out of it. And our problem comes so many times because we've made decisions with money that restrict the flow of the resources that God has trusted to us. Or maybe for you, it's not so much the knot, it's so much that maybe you have one of these. Or maybe you have a bunch of these. And what do you think happens every time you split the flow of that water? You get less and less and less out of each one of the pipes that come out of the end. So we're going to talk about the idea of the why. So let's go back to the idea of being givers just a minute. We said that was the thumbprint of God because God is a giver. And we are made in His image. So before we go any further, I want to reinforce the idea from last week. You ready? It's this. Every decision that we make with money is a spiritual decision. Every decision that you make with money is a spiritual decision. You say, well, I don't necessarily totally believe that. That's fine. If you'll just write it down, we're going to come back around full circle to this idea. But every decision we make is a spiritual decision. Every decision that we make with money to give, to save, or to live is a decision where we choose that we're going to honor God with our money or we're not. And on some level, even if you're not a Jesus follower yet, you'll want to discover how to master this idea of money. There's lots of things in the Bible that are true and they work even if you're not a Christ follower yet. Are you tracking with me? Because God invented resources. He owns it all. He invented the way to get it to you for you to be the conduit to transfer to other people. God knows how it all works. And so these principles work whether you're a Christ follower or not. And on some level, we all pay bills. We all like to eat and live indoors, and we all know that money matters. It makes a difference what we do with it or what we don't do it. If y'all excuse me, I'm going to have to drink a lot today. I took some Dayquil this morning. I can hear color. You know what I'm saying? Like my brain is just 90 miles an hour. So if every decision with money is a spiritual decision, what is our responsibility? What is our responsibility? And we looked at this last week. 1 Corinthians 4, verse 2 says, now a person who is put in charge as a manager, that would be you and I, God owns everything, and He transfers it to us, and then we're the conduit that gets to decide what happens to it. We are the manager. And so if you are a manager, you're put in charge, you're to be found what? What's the last word? Faithful. So what's our responsibility when it comes to any of the resources that God gives us? And it's not just financial. God gives you the resource of time. He gives you the resource of influence. He gives you the resource of health. He gives you the resource of relationships of the people that you know because He wants you to impact His kingdom wherever you go. And so don't just think, okay, He's just talking about money. He's just one of those preachers, on TV, and I'm going to have to mail him a cloth and, He's going to mail me $100 or, whatever. It's not that. This is in relation to all of the resources that God has entrusted to us. So today we're talking about the idea of debt, and it's specifically financial, because here's what we know. There are lots and lots and lots of people that struggle with the idea, they struggle with debt. We know statistically that about 45% of marriages end in divorce, and half of those that end in divorce are because of money fights and money problems. So think if you could solve this one area of arguing, fussing, and fighting, what it would do to your relationship with your spouse or those other people in your family. Man, wouldn't that just be freeing? Just think about it. Just take a deep breath a minute. What if you could go home and not have to argue about it? Now, the fun thing about next week is we're going to lay down some ground rules on how you fight about money, and it's awesome, okay? But lobbing hand grenades at your spouse or significant other is not the best way, okay? So we'll just go ahead and nip that in the bud now, but we're going to talk about that next week. I just thought of something. In that briefcase out front is my big Mr. T chain. Will you run go grab it? Okay, now I'm just going to talk for just a minute. We're just going to have time filler here. But today I want to specifically talk about debt. And it's an uncomfortable subject, but we're all big boys and big girls, so I'm sure we can put our big boy underwears on, and we can have this discussion kind of frankly today, because we know that it will make a difference in people's lives. So speaking of uncomfortable, I'm kind of uncomfortable now. So we're going to wait. If you're watching us on Facebook, this is totally scripted, all right? Here it comes. Here it comes. All right. I'm going to meet you halfway. Thank you. Yes, I did get this at Harbor Freight. Any of y'all know what this is? It's a log chain and padlocks, all right? So what happens when you first graduate? When you get out of college, what happens? Or you go to high school to graduate, what happens? For the most of us, one of the first thing that happens is you get married. This isn't marriage necessarily, but what happens is we go out. I have told that joke 3 times and it gets a laugh every time. Stacy didn't think it's funny. You go out and you get married. I honestly don't know how Mr. T did it. Or Flavor Flav, all right? Because this is pretty stinking uncomfortable, all right? Okay, but you go out and you get married. Either way, maybe you didn't get married, maybe you're single, but either way, you got started in life. And most of us start out, statistically we know that most graduating person from college now leaves college with about $30,000 in student loan debt. Somebody say, ouch. So they graduate college with about $30,000 in student loan debt. And then what happens? You get married, and you go out, guys, and you buy your wife a car that you like. Anybody ever done that? Like, Stacey and I, before we had kids, we went and looked at this car. It was a little 2-seater, awesome little sports car thing. And I was like, yeah, this is so us. And like 3 months later, we found out we were going to have a kid. We were like, no! Like you can't even go to the grocery store without making 3 trips. It's just disaster. So you go out and you get a car, and you wind up looking something like this. And then, guys, the big game's coming in February. And so we go over to the best box, and we get the big 80-inch LED plasma QLED curved 3D disaster thumper surround sound system, whatever television that you could possibly want, and this happens. And then you're like married 12.3 seconds, and all of a sudden somebody says, buy a house, 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 buy a house. And so you go out and you buy a house, and it takes about 6 months to a year to figure out how close to your in-laws that you want to live. And so you rush out and you buy a house, and you're like, all of a sudden you look like this, and we wonder why 45% of marriages end in divorce. Do you know why? Because their leg gets tired. Because we start off life looking like this, and all along God is saying, I wish to goodness that you would just learn how to live with a little bit of financial responsibility, because if you would, you could drop the chain. Thank you, I'll be here all week. The average 25-year-old couple starts life with a household income of $35,000 a year. And tack onto that the car payment and the mortgage payment, the credit card, the house you can't afford, and all of a sudden you find yourself in this situation that just seems out of control. So I want us to read this verse together, and they're going to put it up on the screens here. It's from Proverbs 22:7, and it says this: the rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Now, I don't really care how you parse this word slave. It ain't good. There's never a positive connotation anywhere in the Bible or in history to slavery. And the Bible doesn't mince words. It doesn't say, well, this is kind of like, when your in-laws are dragging you on vacation and you're miserable and all that. But no, it doesn't say that. It says the borrower is slave to the lender. And those are pretty strong words. But everything in our culture is counterintuitive to that, isn't it? Buy now, pay later. 60 months, same as cash, 0% interest, no down payment, no whatever. And everything in our culture is pushing us in the opposite direction. Why do you think culture pushes us so far that way? Because the enemy knows that if he can't break up your marriage one way, he can do it another way. If he can't take your focus off of the things that God wants your focus to be on, then he'll do it another way. If he can't convince your spouse that you really are crazy, then he's going to get into your finances and he's going to tie that in a knot. Are you following me? So the borrower is slave to the lender. And every time we sign up for something like that, what we do is we take the flow of resources that God has given us and we split it off. Okay, I'm going to sign up for this, I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to split it off. And, a lot of us, it doesn't look like this. I mean, it looks like, roots. And stuff's just split off and split off. Okay, I can make this payment, and I can make that payment, and I can do this, and I can do that. Now, look, there are some things, I'm not standing up here saying, like, don't be the non-payment king, all right? But there are some things where our grandma had it right. Because what did grandma do when she wanted to buy something? She saved up for it. Because you can go down to Best Box, where they say 90 days, same as cash, and you can take actual cash monies in there. Do you know they'll take less than what it shows on the sticker price if you have little green dollar bills? So it's not really 90 days, same as cash, is it? Grandma had a secret that we need to rediscover in our life. So think about this. What if you had no payments? What would your life look like if you had no payments? What kind of would that allow you to have? So remember we said at the beginning that every financial decision was a spiritual decision. And I want to share another statement that is 100% true. You ready? It's this. Our financial problems are not math problems. They're heart problems. Our financial problems are not math problems. They're heart problems. Because you see, we learned everything that we need to learn about this part of our financial life in third grade, right? We learned that you can't spend $2 if you've only got $1. There's 487 people in Congress I would like to tell that message to, all right? But you're not in Congress. You can't spend more than you make. Like you learned this in third grade. And so our financial problems are not math problems. They're heart problems. But it's a problem of our heart that I believe that culture has exploited. Because how many times have you heard, or how many commercials have you seen, I deserve it? Have you had a break today? You deserve this, whatever, and you should live here, and you should go on this vacation because it's awesome, right? My family took us on a Hawaii vacation one time when I was in high school. It was like my kind of graduation go-away present thing, and I had thought all along, okay, I'm going to get off the airplane, and the little girl with the hula skirt's going to come put the little flowers on your neck or whatever, all this stuff. So we get off the airplane, and I must have got the girl that was like her first day on the job. Like she stumbles on the way over there. She gives me the thing, and it's like got two crinkled marks where she crushed all the flowers with her hands, and I got there, and I was like, this is nothing like the brochure. But culture says, I deserve it. I've earned it. Or how many of us have said, I work hard, therefore I should have it? How many times has that statement caused a fight in your household? Don't raise your hand. Okay, because that'd be pretty much all of us. So according to a 2007 Experian credit study, the average two-adult household has almost $25,000 in consumer debt, not including the house. Do you realize that looks a lot more like this and a lot less like the freedom that God promises us? And that we find ourselves in is not God's fault. It's ours. But did you also know that we have a good God who, even though you can find yourself in this, He'll give you that. And so the proof is in the pudding. It's in God's and Grandma's ways of handling money. So we're going to look at a verse that you probably heard 100,000 times, and I want to read it to you again. And my prayer is that it gives you, that it has a little new meaning to you this time. Okay, ready? Romans 12, verse 2, it says this. And do not be conformed to this world. Do not do what culture says, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You need new thoughts. You need to think differently way about resources and finances, because the way that we've been living may be contrary to the way that God's saying it. So be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So in your notes it says this: new mind equals new thoughts. We must learn to think differently. We have to begin thinking differently about these things, and not take the income stream that God has given us, or the resources of time and talent and relationships and all of those things that He has given us, and split them. And then we split them again. If it does, Jordan, will you mop it up for me? I love you. Buddy, hold your breath. Okay, that's all I can do, right? It's just those three. But don't we kind of do that when we get to the end of the month? We all kind of hold our breath. Am I going to have enough money to make it to the end of the month? We often run out of month before we run out of money. Don't raise your hand like, I'll just go ahead and do it for us, right? And we do that. We do it accidentally. We don't do it intentionally, but those things happen, and you have to be intentional about where your resources goes, not just your money, but your influence and all those other things. Two, are you with me? Say yes. Okay, so we have to start thinking differently about these things. Like we said a while ago, Grandma knew that if she wanted something, she would have to save up and go and pay cash for it. We have to change our thinking, because different actions over time produce different results. And if you want something different than what you have to do something different to get you there. And so if we want to be people that are generous, and we want to be, we want to be that crazy aunt and uncle, and we want to be, all those things, we have to do something different. And some of us are sitting there thinking, okay, I got you. I want to be generous. I want to remove the pressure from my marriage. I don't want to fight about it. I want to do all these things differently. Okay, but I'm the person that has the debt. I have all this stuff in my life, and it's kind of going sideways, and I'm struggling with that, and there's no hope for me. There's no, there is. You ready? I want to read a couple of verses for you. What do you do when you find yourself in that situation? I have found myself in that situation. I read this verse. I watched a guy named Dave Ramsey. Any Dave Ramsey fans in here? Okay, I watched a guy. I learned a bunch of stuff from him, and we actually walked out of this into financial freedom, like my prayers that God will allow this series to do for you. Proverbs 6 verse 1, it says this: my child, if you have put up security for a friend's debts, if you've co-signed or if you've signed for a loan for yourself, or agreed to pay the debt of a stranger, he says, if you have trapped yourself by your agreement, and you are caught by what you said, follow my advice and save yourself. For you have placed yourself at your friend's mercy. Now swallow your pride. Everybody go, Swallow your pride and go and beg to have your name erased. Verse 4, here we go. Don't put it off. Do it now. Don't rest until you do. Verse 5, save yourself like a gazelle escaping from a hunter, and like the bird fleeing from a net. The Bible, Jesus was very clear about the borrower is slave to the lender. He used very specific, very harsh, very terrible language. How many of you have ever watched the National Geographic Channel? Right? And they're out there on the African safari. And the guy doing the narrating is always the guy in the truck, right? Like got the roll cage around him. He's got the rifle with the tranquilizer dart. And then Stan, who's the village idiot, they put Stan out of the truck. And Stan's walking through this field, and the narrator's like, and now watch as Stan creeps up on the hungry, ravenous lion. And you're like, no, Stan, don't go! And the lion's crouching down, and you look over this hill, and there's this like vast valley full of gazelles. You seen this, right? And they're all like kind of eating and kind of looking around, like kind of like they do, and they got the big horns up there, and they're doing like this, and all of a sudden, and then one of them gets a whiff of something. I don't know if it's Stan or if it's the lion or what, but all of a sudden, one of them looks up like this, and he goes, "Lion!" And all 5,000 of them take off running in every direction that there is possible, because they're running for their life. And the Bible gives us the exact same imagery here. Save yourself like a gazelle from a hunter, like a bird fleeing from a net. If you find yourself in a mess, you have one thing to do, and it's this: run! Don't do it tomorrow. Do it now. Do it today. Go home and say, you know what? I want to be the last cook who has a debt collector call their house. You can do it. It's possible. But you have to be intentional about it. If you discover that you're in a financial mess, the answer is to run. Now, I alluded to this a while ago. This isn't one of those prosperity teachings, right? Like you give a bunch of money and then God's going to bless you. And, you're going to go home and there's going to be a BMW sitting in your front driveway and, God's going to do all this. This is not that talk, okay? God is not a cosmic Coke machine. You do not do for God and then God in return does for you. God does for you because you love Him. Or God does for you because He loves you. And then we do for God in return because we love Him. I'm not trying to earn God's favor. I'm not trying to merit God's favor. I'm not trying to be good enough for God to love me. It doesn't work like that. And so this isn't health and wealth, prosperity. But there are some biblical principles that if we'll put them in place, they'll refocus our resources on the areas that God intends them to be. So what does it look like to be the gazelle, to run from the hunter? You ready? Debt, the exit strategy. I think I put maybe in parentheses there, what I really should call it is steps to reaffirming God's leadership in our finances. And I know that's a mouthful, so the exit strategy works better. Number one, prayer really works. God owns everything. He gives you the power to produce wealth. Okay? So let's get this right. You have a God who loves you. He owns everything. And He's willing to provide those resources to you. He loves you lots. Phone home, E.T. Prayer really works. God is not disinterested in what happens in our life. Pray for wisdom, pray for guidance and opportunities to make wise choices with money. Number two, stop borrowing money. Now, I know I sound like your grandmother, okay? The only difference between me and her in these 4 or 5 points is I'm going to keep my teeth in the whole time, all right? Stop borrowing. Listen, Sparky, you can't fill the hole in if you're shoveling out the bottom, all right? Like, you got to stop. I can remember back in the days at Wally World when everything had the green, like, price sticker on it. You know what I'm talking about? Like, long days ago. And I was there with my mom. And she was paying for stuff, and I remember the day my mom asked the clerk for a pair of scissors, and she stood there in the checkout line and cut up a Visa card. The blood ran out of my body because I thought, we're going to die. We're not going to eat. The police are probably coming right now. You can't do that to a piece of plastic. I mean, I was just this high, but I remember. But I remember my mom finally saying, you know what, I've had enough. There in the middle of Walmart. I don't know what struck her, what the deal was, but it was there. We're not going to do this anymore. But as soon as you draw that line, as soon as you say, I'm not going to borrow money anymore, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this God's way, what's going to happen? There's going to be a test. Okay? What we call that is Murphy's Law. If it can go wrong, it will, right? So here's what you need to do. Number two, you need to save some money. You say, I'm going to get out of debt. Perfect. Go have a garage sale, put a pile of cash in a jar under your mattress. That way, when the hot water heater explodes, like we talked about last week, or like when the tranny goes out on your car, you don't have a car crisis and a financial crisis and a life crisis. Your car's not broken, you are too, right? There's some cash in a jar, and then you have the resources to go and take care of that, so you're not borrowing money and digging out a hole in the bottom. This is exactly what your grandmother would tell you to do. You need to save money for a rainy day. Perfect. So you know all of this. You know everything that we're talking about. You need to save some money to be able to cover those things. Because if you don't, Murphy's Law happens, it all goes sideways, and then Murphy brings his 3 cousins, broke, desperate, and stupid, and they move into your spare bedroom. And then you find yourself back in this same position. So you must save money. Number 4, you need to find some extra money. You need to sell something, take an extra side hustle, garage sale, let it go, eBay, Craigslist, pizzas, papers, dog walk. Now, this isn't like a long-term lifestyle thing, right? But this is I want to change this behavior. I want my kids to grow up in a house where they see that money is a blessing and not a curse. Where they see mommy and daddy being able to do something positive with their resources, and they're able to bless other people, and they're able to do these other things. Money is not something that I grow up in a house having to fight about. Are you with me? Say yeah. Like, we all want that. We do. We want that. But everything in our culture is against that. Why? Because the enemy knows that if he can keep you financially bound, relationally, emotionally, physically, health-wise, if he can keep you bound because you're not doing with your resources of all the time, effort, energy, and health that God has given you, if he can keep you bound up, then you can't do what God's called you to do. And your kids are going to grow up in a house where they're not going to see how to do this God's ways. And then we're going to perpetuate that stereotype down to the next generation of people who think, I deserve it. I own it. I'm going to go buy it. And I'm going to do what I want. So really quickly, here's the practical part of this, and then we're going to pray and be done. You ready? Are y'all okay? Is this too much? Is this like drinking from a fire hose? I mean, it got real still and real quiet. Y'all okay? Everybody okay? Okay, awesome. Practical steps for paying off debt. Dave Ramsey calls this the debt snowball. If you don't know who Dave Ramsey is, write his name down. Go look at his website. He's got tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff. He's an awesome resource for this kind of things. And all of the forms that Dave talks about are on our website at that web address right there, moneymatters.journeypeople.cc. You can go download all those and do this yourself. Okay, ready? Here we go. Number one, how you pay off debt. Practical ways. Number one, you list all your debts, smallest to largest, regardless of your interest rate. Okay, you list them all down, all the credit cards, all the, everything. And in this, Dave teaches not your mortgage, because that's, for most of us, that, huge. And you pay them off smallest to largest, regardless of the interest rate. Why do you do that? Because our money problems are so often they're not math problems, they're heart and head problems. Remember, it's on your sheet. We said that a while ago, okay? So it's not a mathematical problem so much as it is, a heart problem. So we went and did something that we shouldn't have done, and now we find ourselves in this mess. Now, how are we going to fix it? We're going to fix it like this. We're going to list the debt smallest to largest, regardless of the interest rate. We're going to pay off the smallest one as fast as possible. You're going to make all the minimum payments on all of the debts, and you're going to pay the fastest one off as fast as possible. Garage sale, whatever, we're going to throw some money at it. We're going to pay that one off. What happens when you pay off a credit card, or you pay off a medical debt, or you pay off whatever? Woo! Feel it, right? It's like down in here. Like you feel like you want to call somebody. Like you want to run out to the neighbor and be like, woo! I paid off Sears. I've only had my Kenmore dishwasher for 28 years, and it's finally paid off, baby. You pay that thing off, and it feels good. You list those things smallest to largest, and you pay that little one off, and then next month you got that much money to add to the next one. It's kind of like a snowball in Snoopy and Charlie Brown, and they're rolling the snowball down the hill, and you get the little snowball rolling, and it rolls, and every time the snowball rolls over, what happens? It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And every time you pay off a debt, you put that money back into the snowball, and you next month pay off the next one, or pay towards the next one until you get them paid off. It works. We did it. And it's God's and Grandma's ways with money. Take the money you're using, pay the smallest one. Thanks for keeping up with me. The last one is this. Snowball keeps rolling, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So this is all Bible. I hope really practical. Because God wants you to walk in freedom. This is not about you giving more money to Journey Church. I'm not getting a pay raise. I mowed yards on Friday, partly because that's what I like to do. But God wants you to live in freedom and wants you to show you how to train the next generation to find and follow Jesus and to walk in freedom, not just in their spiritual realm, but in the realm of all the areas of our life. Are you tracking with me? Was this helpful? Next week's going to be really awesome.